Hi, everyone in Wellbeing University. I wanted to just create a short overview of the training that we're going to be running through tomorrow on schema coaching for your niche client groups. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of a few specific client groups tomorrow, I thought it would be useful to just take a broader look at what we're really going for with schema coaching and how that differs to the more comprehensive schema therapy approach that you might use with clients who have more lifelong struggles, as well as personality-based difficulties that require that more intensive therapy that can go for 1 to 2 years before you start to see progress. Okay, so our focus with schema coaching is more short-term interventions where there is a lot of clarity, both from the client as well as the therapist or the coach regarding what outcomes you're working towards. So let's just take a look at a few principles before we launch into our training tomorrow. The first concept I want to talk about is the concept of client suitability for schema coaching. The first point that I think is important to make is that we're looking for clients who have a relatively robust personality. What do we mean by that? Well, in coaching, your style is going to be quite direct, and you're not going to want to sort of beat around the bush, so to speak, when it comes to you observing certain patterns in your clients. Your clients, therefore, need to be ready to receive that kind of feedback that you would be giving in this more directive approach. So clients with a more robust personality are going to be able to tolerate having their beliefs and habits challenged by you. They're going to welcome that because that's why they are paying you good money to get to the bottom of their problems quickly, because they are ready for change. And their own ego strength allows you to give them that direct feedback without worrying that you have triggered them, hurt them, that they are too sensitive to be able to take on your advice. The second quality of a client that would be suitable for schema coaching is that they are able to self-reflect and apply the concepts that you cover in your coaching sessions to their everyday life. This is a really important aspect of schema coaching, is that you are just a guide to point out the client's blind spots in your session with them. But the real shifts and the real change occurs because the client is taking the gold nuggets from your session and applying them in their everyday life. You're not going to see rapid shifts in clients that aren't able to engage in this self-reflection, because the minute they leave your session, they might sort of park all the great wisdom and content from the session and slip back into the old modes, old schemas, old ways of going about their lives without making practical, tangible shifts in their day-to-day life. The third quality that I believe is important when identifying a client who's suitable for schema coaching is that they are willing to have the focus on their own patterns that are contributing to the problem, as opposed to a large focus on external events, a large focus on what other people are doing, and to an extent, not having a large focus on processing of the past. If processing of the past is a priority, then that would be a client that is more suitable to schema therapy, which is more long-term. It also includes a real focus on the therapy relationship and this role of limited reparenting that the therapist plays, as opposed to a schema coach where the client has potentially processed events from their past and they're ready to put their focus on changes that they want to make now in their lives, given that they already have a good awareness of where these patterns originated from. And also, another important quality of clients is that they can articulate their therapy goals that are related to meeting their own emotional needs and living in alignment with their core values. In other words, schema coaching is best suited to clients who have language around what their problem is and some kind of understanding or awareness of what their unmet needs are, why it's causing them pain, and a sense that they're not fully living in alignment with their core values or their true sense of self. And they want to live in alignment with their true sense of self, their nature, and they want to get their needs met. Okay, so these types of clients are going to be able to quickly integrate the work that you do in your sessions with them, as opposed to a client who doesn't have that awareness of what exactly they want to shift, including how they want to feel or what specific behavioral changes they might expect to see as a result of working with you. And that leads me to this next point, is that at the start of using a schema coaching framework, both you and your client want to get really clear about their point A and their point B. In other words, where are they at the moment in terms of the key emotional states they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis? What's going on in their important relationships with, their family, their spouse, their friends, their workmates, their clients? What are some of the negative narratives and stories they've got going on in their mind at the moment about themselves, about their relationships, about life? And what is their point B? Where do they want to get to? Where do they want to end up as a result of working with you? What are the outcomes that they are seeking? And what does it mean to them personally if they were to achieve those outcomes? In other words, why is it so important for them to make these shifts and get guidance from you? Now, ideally, a good coach has also walked the path from their point A to point B, and therefore has a lot of wisdom and a lot of tips and hacks and shortcuts and knowledge about how to get to their point B, because ideally we've walked the same path before. And in this graph, if you look at the bottom pathway from A to B, and it's a real squiggly, long, chaotic line, this is often what clients are attempting to achieve by themselves. They have a sense of what outcomes they want to achieve in their lives and where they want to get to and what direction they want to be heading in their lives. But without a guide, it's very hard to know what you don't know. It's very hard to work out how to get to our point B in life without some wisdom from someone who has gone down a similar path before to us. So essentially what you're wanting to achieve in your coaching with your clients is more of the top pathway, a smoother ride between their point A and point B. And you're the ideal person to guide them on that smooth pathway between their point A and their point B, because you have awareness of how to integrate all the bumps, all the resistance, all the things that get triggered on that pathway towards making these deeper changes. So I came up with an example structure that I think is useful, when you're starting out and maybe developing your own process for a schema coaching package. This is just something that will help you to really define the key points and processes that you are supporting your clients through. All right, so step number one is that we want to be able to identify the desired outcome for your client. And this involves getting clarity and a shared understanding between you and your client about what their desired outcome is in behavioral, cognitive, emotional, and physical terms. So that means lots of questions in the early stages, in the initial sessions around, what is it that you want to be feeling as a result of our work together? What new habits and behaviors do you believe you need to develop to support that shift? What new beliefs and stories do you need to be telling yourself to support that outcome? And also physically, how do you expect to feel differently in your body when you achieve this outcome? This step really helps your client to get a clear picture of where they're headed, that compass point in the distance that they are going to be honing and working towards. This is really important because the clearer they are about what their life will look like and feel like when they get there, means that they will start practicing that in their imagination, and they will start to catch themselves more frequently when they're behaving in ways that take them off that path. Okay, step number 2 is getting a better idea about what new narratives are going to support your client to get to their desired outcome. And of course, we do that by identifying the key schemas that are in the way of them getting their desired outcome. And what are the accompanying narratives that go with those key schemas? It's not enough just to name a schema and say, this is your emotional deprivation schema. You and your client need to be able to identify what narrative goes with their emotional deprivation schema. For example, it might be, no one cares about how I feel, or my emotions are just too much for everyone else. That's an example of a narrative that goes with the emotional deprivation schema. Some habits that go with the emotional deprivation schema are doubting one's own emotions, dismissing one's own emotions, not sharing with others what they're feeling, downplaying the importance of emotions, over-analyzing their emotions. These are all habits that you're going to want to help your client shift if they have the emotional deprivation schema. And obviously, the work that goes with this step is developing new narratives that support the desired outcome. So, for example, with the emotional deprivation schema, obviously the healing pathway for that is self-validation. So the client's new narratives will need to somehow incorporate this idea of self-validation, such as, my feelings are valid for me. I don't need the rest of the world to understand how I feel. It's more important that I understand how I feel so that I can develop the language to be able to express my needs in my important relationships. Step number 3, I believe in all good schema coaching processes that there is emotional integration. What does that mean? What that means is that often our clients are not connected to their painful emotions in a really nice, clean way. What I mean by that is the minute they experience negative emotions such as anger, hurt, insecurity, etc., instead of turning towards that part that's in pain, they turn their back on that part. And so there's a disconnect, there's a distancing from that part that's in pain. In other words, we want to help our clients to connect with the part that's in pain, in other words, the inner child, and to develop a close and nurturing relationship to this part. And to do that, we need to help them develop a new inner dialogue in response to their negative emotions. And just to give you a visual picture of that, how that would look and feel sort of in the inner world would be like having their own inner child sitting on their knee, maybe crying, upset, hurt, and their adult part with their arm around the child, comforting, being curious, speaking in ways that invite more opening up and more expressing of what's going on. The fourth step that I believe is really important to guide our schema coaching clients through is the step of empowerment, which involves inner critic work. Okay, so to do this, we need to identify the nature and the role that our client's inner critic is playing in maintaining their schemas. Once we do that, we can then empower our clients to level with their critic, which basically means that we have to guide our clients to strengthen their inner healthy adult. It's almost like mama bear kind of energy, like protecting the more vulnerable baby bear and standing up to the critic. So obviously that means tall postures, feeling grounded in the body, making direct eye contact with the critic, which, by the way, is usually in an empty chair, using a clear, loud voice and assertive language to level with the critic. Because the problem with our clients' inner critics is that the critic is too dominant, it's overpowering, and it's taken over the inner world of our clients. And finally, we want to introduce our clients to the concept of new possibilities in life. Once they become connected to their painful emotions, their inner child, their unmet needs, and they can tolerate feeling those painful emotions in their body without detaching, without dissociating, without criticizing themselves, without running away from their emotions, that opens up a whole new world of new possibilities for our clients, for their futures, that they never would have had available to them if they hadn't addressed their schemas and reconnected with their inner child. So what we want to do is to facilitate this sense of optimism and possibilities about the future, which is essentially what that child would have done naturally if they had been in an environment where their core needs were prioritized, or they felt safe to express themselves fully. It's basically getting them back on the path that they would have been on anyway as a child, which can sometimes come with a period of grief, grieving all of those years that have been lost, not following one's own true path, not feeling like there were infinite possibilities available to them in their life, through much of their childhood and adulthood. There can be a period of grief. But once that grieving is done, then that really opens up clients to a sense of expansion and possibilities and almost taking a creative approach to their own lives, being guided from within their own hearts, their own bodies, their own minds, their own soul towards what kind of life they want to create for themselves.